We are so honored to have Emma Gilmour on with us. Emma is an Extreme E driver from New Zealand, the first female driver and podium winner for McLaren, the first woman to win a round of the New Zealand Rally Championship. She grew up horse riding. She's a rally driver. She owns a car dealership back home when she's not racing. So already just incredibly cool, well-rounded, tons to talk about. The Extreme E season is well underway, with Emma and McLaren getting their first podium of the season at the Hydro X Prix in Scotland last month, alongside her teammate Tanner Faust. So Emma, we are so happy to have you with us. We can't wait to dive into your background, but first, our listeners are huge F1 fans, but we have a lot of people interested in all motorsport series. So tell us, what makes you love Extreme E so much as a series? Why should people tune in? What made you want to become a driver? We'll start there.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Extreme E is super exciting. This is its third season, so it's a new kind of motorsport. But what's super exciting about it is they've just started from scratch, really. They haven't tried to electrify an existing kind of motorsport. Yeah. These vehicles, if you don't have any concept of where they are or the scale of them, they look like remote control buggies. They're these huge vehicles, and they're on terrain that has never seen a racetrack before. So we're racing across country in all sorts of parts of the planet. And then to make it super interesting is it's kind of like a relay race. So every team has a male and female driver, and we each take turns driving in the car. So one will start, and then we come into a switch zone, sort of like a pit area, like an F1. And then that driver gets out, the next driver gets in, and then they do their laps and finish the race. And contact's allowed. It's a bit like rallycross in terms of anything can happen. And usually we're as surprised as the audience at home. It's very surprising because of the terrain and the cars. They move around, and it's bumpy and uphills, downhills. It's crazy. The last race where we podiumed, it was super muddy, so we could barely see out of the windscreen. It's crazy racing, really. Everyone loves watching it when they watch it, and it's short, sharp racing as well. Like generally a race is over within 15 minutes. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
That's so fun. And I grew up in Scotland, so I'm just envisioning like you guys driving through the Scottish countryside with all the cars. I definitely feel that. So Tiggy mentioned at the beginning you were a horseback rider, then you made the switch to rally driving, and then of course you were McLaren's first female driver. So what led you to do all those different switches? It's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, the being McLaren's first female driver, that's something that I never, ever would have imagined happening. Growing up in New Zealand, a huge fan of McLaren and the legacy that Bruce created started with 60 years ago. So to be here, that's something that I never pictured, because McLaren's an F1 brand. So I never imagined being an F1 driver growing up. But going back to the horse riding, grew up horse riding. Loved eventing, wanted to go to the Olympics, and but sadly none of my horses had read the game plan about how we were going to go to the Olympics. They had differences of opinion. So that sort of came to an end where I realised that maybe my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I discovered rally co-driving. So in rallying, it's like a motorsport where we rally on closed stages or roads. And in the car, you have a driver and you have a co-driver or a navigator. So I started as a navigator, and then finally had to go in the driver's seat, and it was the best feeling in the world. I was just hooked from day one, the feeling of going fast on a gravel road and having a road completely to yourself with no oncoming traffic, no police officers. Best feeling in the world. So I love driving, and that was kind of what kept me motivated and passionate about the sport for many, many years. And then when Extreme E came onto the horizon, I guess it really opened up an opportunity for me as a female driver to get an opportunity on the world stage. And I was fortunate enough that Zach had noticed me, Zach from McLaren, and he gave me the phone call. So, it still gives me goosebumps because so cool. I just never would have pictured being here at McLaren as a rally driver. So it's super cool that McLaren has broadened its horizons with all its different race teams that it has, and supporting a series like Extreme E is really exciting.
Yeah, it is so cool. And to have the McLaren name, we see Bruce over your shoulder there. Zach Brown giving you a call. That is so cool. And unless I'm mistaken, weren't you announced at COP26 as the first female driver in the presence of Prince Charles as well? What was that moment like?
Again, it was another pinch me moment. It was just so surreal because, I mean, you grow up watching Prince Charles on TV and then he's just like there. It's like, it's those moments where you think, I know this person. And then it's like, no, I don't. I've just seen them on TV my whole life. But we were told when we were briefed about meeting him about we were allowed to, or you could curtsy if you wanted to. And I was like, of course I'm going to curtsy. When else am I going to be able to curtsy for someone? So, I don't know if it was a good curtsy, but I curtsied.
You did it practice?
I did practice.
I don't even know how you would practice that.
I would be tripping over myself. I would have no idea.
Yeah, but it was super cool. Yeah, again, amazing experience.
That's so cool. So speaking of practicing, I guess we can jump into what it's like, practicing being day in the life of an extreme E driver. We know, right, with F1, there's like 22, 23 races a year. You're in the sim, brand partnerships, media events, recording podcasts, I guess. What's the schedule like for Extreme E? You have 5 or so race weekends in a year. You're going to pretty remote places. What are you up to in between? How are you preparing?
Yeah, it's a real challenge with Extreme E because we have so few events. We have not nearly as much seat time as like an F1 driver gets, like you say. And we also don't have simulators like they do, like the Formula cars do. So we have a lot more downtime, which for me, I try and fill up that time by driving as many other vehicles as possible, just so that you've got seat time and practice. But yeah, and then other things, obviously we're doing opportunities like this with media and other things. But yeah, back home in New Zealand, I have a rally car that I still compete with, and then also just doing other training opportunities and just trying to drive as much as possible.
So cool. Yeah, it must be a challenge. I feel like even F1 drivers complain about the time they get in seats being so little. It's a totally different level.
Yeah, well, with the vehicles being electric, we don't do huge amounts of running at the events, and also with the events being about sustainability, it's also part of it as well, is that we're not doing lots and lots of mileage. So really challenging. And for the course walk, we effectively just walk the course, which, as you can imagine, looks quite different at walking speed to coming across all these bumps and dips at 100 miles an hour. So yeah, quite different.
Like a team hike, hiking.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to dig into the sustainability aspect of Extreme E a little bit. We just started at For the Girls a sustainability series called For the World. And I would love to just hear a little bit about the legacy days and maybe sustainability more broadly. I know Extreme E has partnered with a lot of organizations, everything from forest security in the Amazon to planting trees in Senegal. Tell us about that experience and how they're important to Extreme E.
Yeah, I mean, you've summed it up very well there, but it's a really integral part about the whole what Extreme E stands for. So every event we go to, we have a legacy project, as they call it, and that involves us as drivers going along and learning about what the challenges that area is facing in terms of environmental damage and change. And I guess we learn about what they're doing there to help. But the bigger message, I guess, is learning and helping to educate about what we can all do better or differently to leave the world in a better place. And I think that's what's really cool about Extreme E, is that it's using an exciting form of motorsport to help educate and inspire the next generation. So going to these remote locations that have never seen live sport of anything, and we're basically shining a spotlight on that area and highlighting what's happening whilst doing motorsport in a sustainable way. We travel with a very small team. There's only like eight of us, and then we're in these inflatable tents, and then everything's shipped on a boat between the events, which is why it's such a small calendar spread out over a long time, because it takes the time between the events to be with everything being shipped. So yeah, and then on top of that, we have obviously the male and female element as well, which is super cool. No other motorsport has ever done that, where they've really given women a platform to compete equally in equal machinery and to have that opportunity.
It's so interesting what you were saying about like shipping up and moving across the world. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we talk about when it comes to F1 sustainability, because it is just like so many different people and all, so many different races. So, we know that there are a lot of high profile F1 people involved in the sport, Nico Rosberg, Hamilton, of course, McLaren as an organization. So do you think F1 is taking some of the sustainability practices and the learnings of Extreme E, like you just mentioned, and implementing? I think it's such a great platform that you all have to kind of educate other teams across the motorsport world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, you've summed that up really nicely, but I think it's what McLaren noticed as well, and seeing that, getting involved with a series like Extreme E, along with all of the other racing that McLaren does, what they can learn and take away from Extreme E can be used in other areas of their racing. So it's part of a much bigger package, I guess, and learnings, which is really exciting. I think another thing about the Extreme E, that we don't have spectators, so it's a very small footprint that and it's about that racing without leaving a trace. So I think what we're learning and what we're showing can be done, and what we can achieve with Extreme E will filter across into the other categories of motorsport.
Yeah. What is that like as a driver to not have spectators? Is that a challenge, or are you guys just so excited to be there?
It's really interesting, because you're always, I guess, aware of being watched, if that makes sense, and knowing that it's live TV. Like, I can remember my very first Extreme E race that I did, and just the nerves beforehand, because you're like, there are cameras everywhere, and anything that good or bad, that's about to happen is going to be for the world to see. So there's it comes with a bit of a different pressure versus, for example, what I come from with rallying, where I will rally for 30 odd kilometres on a stage, and I won't see people for quite a large section of that. Extreme E is more like being in a gladiator's ring. Everyone sees everything, so it keeps it pretty exciting, and definitely feels the pressure.
And how's the energy like when there isn't spectators? How are you hyping yourself up for the race, besides the obvious of a million cameras looking at you?
It's actually, when it comes down to the routine that I have inside the car, it's exactly the same regardless of what the spectator situation or camera situation is. It's always the same. I have a set routine of what I do in the countdown, with the 3 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds as you get down to lights going green. And so I just focus on that to try and get yourself into the correct mindset.
Incredible. So earlier in one of the questions that we were talking about, you did mention how, every team has a male driver and a female driver. Of course, one thing that we talk about on our podcast, literally called For the Girls, is getting women involved in motorsport. And I think it's so incredible that we're able to have the privilege to talk to folks like yourself, where you are making huge strides and you have such an incredible platform. But in terms of your perspective as a Extreme E driver, a female driver, a rally driver, motorsports in general, like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen if you wanted to kind of like wave a magic wand and say, okay, we want the sport to be accessible for anyone and everyone?
I think a lot of the challenges that a female young driver will face is the same as a young male driver. Like, one of the biggest challenges with motorsport is the cost of motorsport. It's not a cheap sport to get into. And for me personally, I personally have always focused on the positives that being a female in the sport has brought to me. And for me, that was standing out from the crowd when it came to media exposure, and people remembering you and your story. And I know, living in New Zealand and getting opportunities overseas, I got many opportunities because I was a female in a male sport. So for me, I was focusing on the positives. But I think in terms of waving a magic wand and making motorsport more accessible, I guess it's making people aware of how they get into motorsport. So it's educating and showing a pathway that people can get into. Speaking with my experience in New Zealand, we have a lot of car clubs that are very much grassroots that you can join, even without a vehicle, if you want to get in on a volunteering level and that sort of thing. And I think what's really exciting with the series like Drive to Survive is that it's showing what an exciting industry motorsport is and how big an industry it is. It's not just drivers. Obviously, we get the spotlight, but there's so much more behind us that allows us to go fast. And I think it's such an exciting industry to be in. So whether it's being a mechanic or an engineer or doing podcasts or the media or the social side of it, there's just so many parts of a motorsport team that it's a really exciting industry.
Totally. And we've not been doing this for too long, a little over a year, but we have a lot of listeners and young women in America and abroad who are so excited about getting into the sport, wanting to be involved in any way. And this is something we ask every person we talk to on the podcast. But in terms of advice you would have for those young women or just people in general trying to break into the sport, there are a lot of things that motorsport can be doing, but what can some of these young women be thinking about?
I think the biggest muscle you probably use in motorsport is resilience. And I think, that's probably true in life in general, to be fair. I focus on motorsport because that's my experience. But, it's being able to always just keep focusing forward, because there's always going to be disappointments and knockbacks. But it's staying true to what's in your heart and your passion and what you want to achieve and what you want to do, and just learn from everything, but always be focusing forward and just keep working towards that goal.
Quick follow-up question on that advice, because I love that advice, and I think for you that was probably like very practically used when you made that huge jump, like to go from horseback riding and just to make a leap like that. I think is so cool, and I think can be an example of empowerment for a lot of people. But like, how did you have that ability to, like, the trust in yourself to just face forward and do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's having that faith in yourself that, whatever's to come, you'll still be able to manage and to deal with it. And I think as long as you're following your heart and you really know in your heart that it's what you want to do, I do believe things will work out. Because when I gave up the horse riding, I had no idea that this was what lay ahead for me, and it was awful, because I was giving up on a childhood dream, and I just was like, wow, how can I be doing this? But I think it's just having that courage to really to be true to yourself, because it's got to be what you want to do, and it's got to be what's in your heart, and I think then life has a way of rewarding you for having that courage to be true.
Yeah, that's so beautifully put. Tell us about life back home a bit. Do you still horse ride at all? Tell us about your car dealership. So cool. What do you get up to at home?
I would love to still have horses. It's really weird. I still dream about horses, and they cross over with my cars. So I'll be running late for a rally, and then there's my horse waiting. So it's weird. So there's still very much, I still love the horses, but sadly I don't have any. But yeah, I do have the car dealership at home. And that was something I feel very fortunate through from motorsport, was having relationships and connections where I got the Suzuki franchise back home. And again, that was a bit of a leap of faith and courage, and believing you can do something when you don't really know if you can, but giving it a go anyway. So so very proud of the dealership that I have back home, and got a wonderful group of people back home running it for me whilst I'm over here chasing my other dream.
My partner has I think year 2000 Suzuki Vitara in New York City, which is an interesting and unique sight.
Yeah, I bet.
It's so funny. Well, we know that the next race is coming up in Sardinia in July. We're very excited for that and to watch. And maybe just to wrap up, have you had a favorite race location or experience over your time as an Extreme E driver?
One of the really special places we visited was in the first season, and it was when I was racing with another team as a reserve driver, and we went to Greenland, and we got to stand on the world's second largest ice shelf, and it was just, it was really special. And that was part of a legacy project, and just learning about, the pollution and why it's melting faster and that. And then, we raced in front of this huge ice shelf. It was surreal. It was one of those amazing moments where you're just like, wow, I am here in front of an ice shelf racing motorsport. Yeah, crazy.
So cool. Well, Emma, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a pleasure to talk with you. We're going to be cheering you on all season in all things. And we'll definitely chat soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed my chat.